I just landed in the Philippines. I'm at the Manila airport. I'm looking for, hey, a better second half of my life, okay? Like during the first half of my life, I learned from all my screw ups, my job, marriage, kids. Look, a brief intro here, folks, to who the hell I am. I was married in Iowa to a woman called Susan. So I was an electrical engineer. I met Susan in college and we got married after college. Right after college, I got a job. We had 2 kids. I had a vasectomy. That's the beginning, okay? Now, Susan wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Now, I was making plenty of money as an engineer. There was no need for her to work. So I thought it's a good idea, kids should be raised by their mother. Now, the goal with Susan and myself after we married, our overall life objective, this was it, folks. It was very simple. Raise our kids well and save as much money as we can for retirement, okay? Pretty simple expectations. So the game of life began. Just like a lot of professional jobs, folks, as I worked my way up the professional ladder, I had a lot of late nights, early mornings. Look, I'd have preferred to spend more time with my wife and kids, but life has a way of slowly getting its way, You know how jobs are. However, Susan did enjoy the money I provided. I mean, the money was rolling in, but she also did complain that I was often absent. You know how women are. If there's something to complain about, they will. Okay, my wife aside, as far as the kids go, well, I mean, they were closer to their mother, of course, look, I was barely ever home. It was not what I wanted, it's just what happened. So my 2 kids growing up were, unmotivated with their responsibilities. Not exactly the hardest working kid. Look, unlike me, when I was their age, I was always cutting grass, trying to make money. Anyway, my 2 kids, we're not going to talk about them much, but they were unaffectionate toward me. Unless, of course, they needed something. Of course, if they did want something and I gave it to them, they were excited. They loved me at that moment, but the novelty always quickly wore off. Like they wanted a gaming system, new shoes, new this, new that, whatever the thing was that at that time while they were growing up, they always wanted it. I always gave it to them. It was the least I could do. I was hardly ever home. I could buy the love of my kids, and that was just at the time I was so busy, it was just easier to do that. So that's just how things worked for a long time. I could see the writing on the wall as far as my family dynamics, okay? But like most of us, look, I was just trying to survive my day and ultimately my time as a 9-to-5 working schmuck. I was tired. I just wanted to go get into the retirement age as quickly as possible. I wanted to have my kids move out, get their education, move out, live their life. I was basically an ATM machine, and I knew it, and I brought it on myself. But by the time I figured that out, it was too late to fix anything, as if I had the energy to try and solve it anyway. But listen, folks. The one important day here, I decided I'm not going to accept this, okay? I am going to try and change my family. I've got a chance now to try and fix my family, mold them into the way I want them to be. I can do it now, okay? But I can't do it later. So what I did was I took a 3-month work leave of absence in order to spend more time with my wife and kids. I wanted to make up for lost time. It was my attempt to make up for lost time. I mean, look, I had the responsibility to provide for my family, but I also have the responsibility to spend more time with my wife and teach my kids as best I can the lessons that I wish I had taught them earlier. For example, just to appreciate what they have, to be humble, etc., etc. Work hard, the regular stuff. I wasn't teaching them this stuff. Neither was my wife. This was the idea and the objective to taking 3 months off of work. I had plenty of savings, so there was no worries there. I was going to fight for my family. I wanted to fix my family, or at least attempt. I wanted to attempt to fix my family, put them on the right track. It was the perfect time of year, being the summer holidays for my kids before they went back to college. And what I had planned was, we would spend a month in the woods, within nature, just my family and I, and we would grow our family bond. Just as I did, every summer growing up, I would spend it in with my family in the woods, and we had a great time. So I did get this time off work. I got 3 months off work, but there was one problem. My kids were not interested in spending their summer in the woods. Maybe, I should have gone over that with them before asking for time off, but I just sort of wanted to surprise them. They didn't say specifically that they didn't want to do it, but it was a little obvious. They'd rather watch paint dry than spend their vacation with their father. It is what it is. It was a little obvious. Both my kids agreed on one thing. They'd both rather spend their summer holidays with their friends than with me. So I had no choice but to let my kids do what they want. But, okay, that was my kids. Okay, that was my kids. They were going to do, I'd have to let them do what they want. However, I still had my wife that I could work on. So I asked Susan, my lovely wife, the one and only love of my life, to go camping. Her and I, just the two of us. It would be like a romantic getaway, that we both deserved. We had not been, I blame myself. We had not been the most affectionate couple in the world for quite a while as life got to us. But Susan, just like my kids, said she had better things to do. She was not interested in going to the woods either. Susan's hobby at that time, she was playing tennis. She had tennis lessons, tennis tournaments. All her friends were in tennis. She was a tennis girl. The kids were, she was always playing tennis when the kids were at school. Anyway, tennis was her thing. She had her own friends, her own social life. Unlike myself, I lived for my job. I didn't really have friends. So on my 3 months off, there's no time with my kids. They don't want to spend their time with me. I got a little more time with my wife, but her priority was tennis. And ultimately, I spent my vacation at home working around the house. So I could at least spend more time, a little more time with my wife. But ultimately, I took a renewed interest in the lawn and lawn work and, cooking. I'm not a sit around, watch TV kind of guy. The plan I had failed, so I tried to make a new plan. Look, my wife is at tennis all the time. So, I'm at home. I'll have dinner ready on the table when my wife got home from her daily tennis lesson. I kind of enjoyed it. Of course, I was hoping my wife would make sort of a conscious effort to notice my effort here. But next thing I know, half of my leave of absence was over and there was nothing. No real extra romance. Not that we had any to begin with. Nobody really cared that I was home. And on a side note, sex between Susan and myself was, once in a blue moon. It'd been 20 years. It started, decades ago. It was great decades ago. And it just slowly went downhill. And you know how these things go. But, during my leave of absence, one of those blue moons did happen on the latter half of my leave of absence. It didn't take much for me to finish, unfortunately, as it had been a while, but finally I was able to, touch the D cups that I had paid for a decade earlier. But yeah, it did take me all of 30 seconds to finish. Do my thing. I was hoping for a quick rest and then a round two, but during the 30 seconds that we did have together, it took me right back to those early days when things were hot and heavy. So anyway, when I was done, I was disappointed in myself, but let's see what happens. 10 minutes later, I could get a stiff sail again, as I was hoping for round two. Hey, give me another chance. It had been a while. But after the 32nd round one, she got up, went to the bathroom to do her thing, and that was that. As she left for the bathroom, I heard her say something like, "What the hell was that?" Anyway, that was that. But those 30 seconds were the highlight of my 3-month leave of absence. After our round one, we never did the deed again. This deed, as if things couldn't get any worse, even added strain outside the bedroom. So anyway, the 3 months were done, and it was almost a relief heading back to work. these long days, the big paychecks. At least I could forget about my family problems. So being back to work, everything was back to normal. I'm assuming Susan was happy to have time away from our strain, that existed in the house. We didn't have sex. We barely talked. It was just purely business, what's for dinner kind of thing. But the good news was that Susan did win one of her tennis tournaments. So she was enjoying her life. I was very proud of her because tennis was her life. So after winning one of these tennis things, one of her prizes was sort of a hoodie. And it was oversized, but it was a hoodie, and she liked it. And she began wearing this oversized hoodie around the house. It became her new style. She got more of them. But for whatever reason, she did stop playing tennis. Okay, so after this highlight of her winning this tournament, then she stops playing tennis. Okay, well, whatever. It's her choice. It just seemed that she was enjoying it. So, I was surprised, but these things happen. Changes happen. After that, she started gaining weight. I assumed it was because, she wasn't getting as much exercise, but whatever. These things happen slowly over months. So it's something I notice slowly here and there, but, we all go through changes. So, these things happen. And so, she's not interested in tennis anymore. Okay, well, that's okay. She wants to wear oversized hoodies. That's okay. Whatever makes her happy. She's gaining weight. Well, what can I do? But then there was an incident. Okay, Susan was in the shower. And while in the shower, she had slipped and fallen in the shower. I ran in to help her. See what was happening. It turns out there was a lot of blood. She had a big gash on her head, blood all over the place. Pretty bad fall, but with all the commotion, I did notice something. Yet there was blood on her head. She had a gash, but what I realized was, holy cow, I looked at her stomach. She was freaking pregnant. I was shocked. But her obvious belly aside, I called 911 and the ambulance quickly arrived and took her in. Now, during our wait for the ambulance, we're in the house. There was no mention of the obvious big bump in her stomach. But she got to the hospital. She had her gash sewed up, and the baby was fine. So that was that. So up till now, there's been no talk of why she hid this pregnancy from me. But she remained in the hospital for the sake of the baby, and I stayed with her, and I kind of asked the obvious question because I didn't know how else to word it, but, it was kind of awkward. My hand was on her stomach, and I said, "Why did you keep this from me?" Susan, she said, she's sorry. She didn't tell me because she was embarrassed. Now, what Susan and I know, and what you may have skipped earlier on in the video at the very beginning, listen, if you didn't hear it at the beginning, you're going to hear it now. After our second baby, I had a vasectomy. So I brought this up very carefully with her because it's not really, how can I bring this up? When is a good time? But she said it was maybe the vasectomy doctor didn't do a good job. Nevertheless, Susan said she was sorry for everything that happened. Not about the baby, but about life, our life, our lack of love. And that, when the baby comes out, we're going to start a new life, a new loving life with our new baby. She's going to focus more attention on me. There's not going to be any more monotony. You got to understand, guys, love is love. Sometimes we're stupid. Susan was my first love. She was my love, my only love. I cherished her. But from between the ambulance ride to the hospital and now, she had stayed in the hospital for about a week. And I stayed with her. All we ever talked about is our new life, how things are going to be better. We're going to have a better relationship. Susan had apologized repeatedly for her lack of love in our marriage. And I promised it was going to be different on my end now, too. I was going to try and spend more time with her. Well, do the best I can. And with all the trauma from the fall, earlier, the baby pops out. Okay, so the baby pops out early. It had not been 9 months. It had been maybe 8 months. I can't remember. I'm trying to block this part of my memory out. So skipping the details, the baby pops out, okay? And, this happens and that happens. And, next thing I know, my wife is breastfeeding this baby. And I noticed what everyone else noticed.